When audiences come to the opera, they see the singers, the orchestra, and the story unfolding on stage. But long before the curtain rises, an entire team is working behind the scenes to make each performance possible. On this episode, we're pulling back the curtain on opera production. My guests are Sarasota Opera Director of Production, Scott Keclik, and Production Stage Manager, Francesca MacBeth, two of the people responsible for turning an artistic vision into a live performance. From moving scenery and managing rehearsal schedules to coordinating countless details backstage, Scott and Francesca share what it takes to bring an opera to life. We discuss career paths, collaboration, opening night energy, and the surprises that come with working in live theater. If you've ever wondered how a set change happens in under a minute, or who keeps everything running smoothly once the lights go down, this episode offers a fascinating look at the work audiences rarely see but experience every time they attend a performance. Now, let's take a look at what goes into orchestrating an opera. I'm Hallie Geyh, and this is Behind the Blue Curtain. Thank you both so much for joining me today and for agreeing to be on the podcast. Can each of you introduce yourselves and let us know what your role is at Sarasota Opera?
I'm Francesca MacBeth. I'm the production stage manager at Sarasota Opera. That means I'm the head of the stage management department.
And I am Scott Keclik. I am the director of production for Sarasota Opera.
Let's start with you, Scott. What does the title actually mean in practice?
So pretty much everything that happens behind the scenes, behind the stage, behind the curtain, in one way, shape, or form comes across my desk, whether that's the crew who does all the things, whether that's the scenery, the lighting, hiring, staffing, costume shop, all of those things. That all is sort of my purview. And we also deal with this with the designers and all the things that it takes to put on a show from the backstage portion.
So, Francesca, if you had to explain your job as a stage manager to a 6-year-old, how would you describe it?
I think I've probably had to do this at some point or other. So I would say that I'm in charge of all of the things that it takes to put on a show. So I'm in charge of the lights. I'm in charge of making sure that the props and the costumes are in the correct people's hands and on the correct people's bodies. I'm in charge of actually making sure that people are going on stage at the correct time. And when I say me, sometimes that means just me. Sometimes that means me and a bunch of assistants. We do everything that isn't seen.
This is very interesting because I think a lot of people don't really understand how one becomes what both of you are. So, Scott, could you let us know how your path led you to Sarasota Opera?
So I've been in theater in one form or another for pretty much my entire career. In college, I started actually in music, so sort of that was, but then kind of made my way into the theater department. And then later in my career, got the opportunity to work in opera, which was sort of a good marriage of theater and sort of my classical music background as well. So I've always enjoyed that part of it. But from there, working through backstage, I worked in props for a while. I've always worked in scenery. I now have a sort of a hand in all of those things, and I'm able to sort of facilitate all the people who get to hands-on do all those things.
What was your background in music?
Growing up, I played piano, and actually when I started in college, I was started as a piano major, but I was also in the marching band, and I also played guitar, and I also did all kinds of sort of music has always been a big part of my life.
Very cool. Francesca, how did you first become interested in stage management?
It's interesting. My first season of life, I was a ballet dancer, and probably in my late teens and early 20s, sometime around there, I started becoming envious of stage management in the weirdest way. Like I would be performing in a piece, or I would be, adjacent somehow to a production. And I started just on my radar was what stage managers were doing. And I really, I remember feeling this feeling of jealousy. Like, I want to do that. Like, I want to do what they're doing. It was around the time I had a injury that came at a time in my dance life that I realized it kind of was time for me to close that chapter. And I ended up transitioning into stage management, and I never looked back.
So having grown up around Sarasota Opera, did you always imagine yourself working in theater?
100%. 100%. I am a theater person for life, forever and always.
It's also interesting, that idea of communication. I was thinking about this the other day when I was sort of compiling questions for you all, that you have to be an expert in communication, I would think, and be able to talk to different types of people, especially artists. Can you sort of maybe shed a little bit of light on how that works for you?
Absolutely. One of the things that I love about it, we're the person through which all communication funnels. So for example, at the end of a rehearsal day or a performance, we send out a report that goes to anywhere from probably 40 to 60 people, depending on the company, detailing everything that was going on in that particular rehearsal or performance. All of that really flows through everyone, and we are in contact with all the departments as we're in rehearsal or performance for a show. And then additionally, like you said, in the rehearsal room, I always say to my staff, we're the first faces that people see when they walk into the room. We're the last people there at the end of the night. So we really are like the first line of defense, for lack of a better word. And we do really interface with everyone in the whole process, from the performers of all kinds, whether it's singers, whether it's dancers or extras that are involved in the show, music staff, staging staff, the director, the assistant director, and then everybody who works in the departments that Scott oversees as well. And, I think for me, the biggest thing is just when we're dealing with people who are having a hard time, which obviously as human beings we all do on any given day, or especially if the show is particularly stressful, or if it's a singer who's singing a huge role that they've never sung before and they're super nervous. It's really just coming in and allowing people to air what they're feeling and allow people to be seen and heard, and then going from there. Sometimes that's all people need, and sometimes we need to do something after that. But that's kind of the biggest way that myself and the people who work for me, approach things, I think.
Mm. The next question I wanted to talk to y'all about, what was your first exposure to opera?
My parents always were classical music fans, and so we were taken to the orchestra concerts and classical music concerts from a very young age. There was always sort of classical music playing in the house. I didn't see my first opera probably until prior to graduate school. I actually got a job working in an opera, just doing props, and was like, it was sort of a whole new world for me.
And Francesca.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's literally in my bloodline. My mom was an opera singer and sang professionally until I was 14, and my dad is a conductor. So I couldn't tell you the first opera I saw, because it just was always how I lived my life, and it came into my life like literally at birth.
When audiences think of Sarasota Opera, they tend to think about singers, conductors, orchestras, and what happens on the stage. So the work that happens behind the scenes is often less visible, as you both have explained already a bit. So when people find out what you do for a living, what is the biggest misconception they have about your job, Scott?
When they hear I work at Sarasota Opera, their first is, oh, you're a singer. And so that's sort of the natural connection of, there's nothing to do in opera except for singing. It is sort of eye-opening for people, even just in a conversation, to understand that we go up to about 300 people during the season. It takes all those people to put on a show.
What are you thinking about today in relationship to this upcoming season, Scott?
There's quite a bit going on this time of year. I mean, people think, oh, it's the summer, you're quiet. We've got bids out for building the shows. So I'm in communication with a number of different shops. Our Traviata is getting built. Our Yennefer is in process. Our Pinafore are all sort of out in the bid process to shops. For Hansel and Gretel, we were talking about trucking, getting it here for the fall. I'm in communication with people about staffing. I'm talking to stage managers and wig and makeup folks and in other departments, and we're kind of getting our crew together. There's always a lot of moving parts that we're involved with.
Wow, it's a web. A web of all sorts of different things, and you have to be the spider in the center of all of it, it seems like.
Indeed.
So at what point does a season stop being this idea? When does it start to feel real? When does it start to come together for you in particular, Francesca?
Stage management typically joins about a week before the first rehearsal. We're preparing the rehearsal space, and we're in communication with all the members of the company that we need to be to get the show rolling. So a more narrow targeted focus because we get on the ground closer to the actual start date.
So then, Scott, you are there for the entire process. So when does it start to come together for you?
I mean, come together is, it literally is just that. It's when people start arriving. We start the planning process in some instances 2 to 3 years ahead of the actual show. But once people actually arrive in the building and we grow from 25, 30 full-time people we have here to 250, 300 people arriving, that's when the sort of energy changes and things really start picking up and start really getting into the nitty-gritty of the rehearsal process. That energy starts building towards the opening.
All right, we're doing Hansel and Gretel. What happens next? What happens as soon as that is decided?
Generally, once it's announced, we sort of have a pretty good idea of the direction we're going. But then we start, is there a director on board? Is there a designer on board, lighting designer, costume designer? We then start to have sort of preliminary production meetings, which at that point, usually Francesca is remote from wherever she is in the world. We'll remote Francesca in to sort of be a part of those production meetings and then get the ball rolling in different realms from that standpoint.
Okay, so then how do you keep everyone moving in the same direction? I'm very curious about how you wrangle everyone.
The herding of cats is always a good analogy, but,
yes.
but generally speaking, Francesca and I thankfully work really well together, I feel like, and we are in constant communication. I'm a facilitator. I whether it's information or tools or materials or time or whatever the case might be, giving people the resources that they need to be able to sort of do their jobs as well and as effectively as they can.
What is the most ridiculous problem you've ever had to solve backstage?
Oh, man. I don't know. I mean, it's sort of the expect the unexpected to a certain extent. And everything that we do and all of the protocols and all of the discussions and all of the planning, all of that is like the norm and how we hope things are going to go. There's power outages. I had, not in Sarasota, but in another company, we had a show stop because there was a fire that started backstage. We had a patron who had a medical emergency and we had to stop the show in the middle of the performance. I would say from my standpoint, it's certainly things like that, where if you're lucky, the show starts and then it ends and everything happens normally in between, but we always have to be prepared for the unexpected. And sometimes that means putting an understudy on in the middle of a performance, which I've done many times. In my world, it's things of that nature, whether it's weather or a patron emergency or a fire or a sick performer. It happens, and it doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen every season even, but you kind of have to always be ready to go into that flow state and to make sure that people are safe and everybody knows what's happening when you have to go off the rails, quite literally.
What about you, Scott? Anything you want to add to that?
It's funny because like what we do on certain days seems ridiculous. The idea of like what's something ridiculous, it all seems ridiculous. So
it's all perspective, right?
It absolutely is all perspective. We plan for the unexpected, and that's part of what it's live theater, it's live entertainment. So there's always things that have the potential to kind of go astray. I mean, everybody knows their part, everybody does their part, and we kind of are able to do it hopefully as seamlessly and safely as possible.
And also just the joy in that, the idea that we don't work in TV or film, although working in live television, I can't imagine the stress of that. But we choose to work in this world where things can always go wrong. And it's this kind of ephemeral moment in theater. It happens once and then that performance never happens again.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting. Anything could happen. And sometimes it does. Have you ever worked with animals on the stage?
Yeah. I can immediately think of 3 productions. We did one production at Sarasota Opera, which was of Mice and Men. It was one of my first seasons here. There are actually 2 dogs in the show, but one dog is a puppy, so we used a prop dog for that. The other dog, there's no way around it. If you're doing a traditional production, you're not doing a concept with like a puppet or a projection or something. You have to have a dog. So we had this very, very lovely, sweet, wonderful dog that was part of our show. I did a production at Lincoln Center that involved multiple live animals, so it's a whole thing.
Scott, what are some of the biggest logistical challenges that audience members would never consider?
If what we're doing is so seamless that they're able to kind of lose themselves in the production, then we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Once you start seeing what we do, then we've done something wrong. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that we are a rep opera company, which means that all 4 of our shows are performing concurrently at a certain point in the season. So we get to a point where we have 4 shows worth of scenery. All of that scenery has to be stored somewhere, and it all has to be able to store in the opera house. The logistics of moving all these pieces, literal moving pieces, and then and sometimes in the middle of a show, it's a 20-minute intermission or it's a 30-second scene shift, and the stage looks completely different from when the curtain went down to when it goes back out again, and trying to do that as quickly and quietly and safely as possible. Because we live in a world where there's CGI and there's instant changes and those kinds of things, the fact that we're rolling giant pieces of scenery or flying giant pieces of scenery, all of those sort of literal moving parts and pieces that are done by human beings that people don't always understand.
Literally, choreography is happening backstage. There is a dance that has to happen, Tetris, whatever you want to call it, where people know where and when to move.
We actually schedule time for certain shows where the moves are so complex that we literally schedule time with stage management and a stopwatch basically to choreograph the moves to make sure that everybody is where they need to be.
And Francesca, what role do you play in terms of the scenery movement and the crew backstage?
It's a collaboration between Scott, our technical director, myself, and then the rest of my staff. So it really, as Scott said, if it's complex and there are quick changes, so not necessarily an intermission where we have 20 or 15 minutes to do a scene change, but if we're doing something, for example, Susanna, the opera we did this past winter season, the majority of the changes in that show were quick changes, and we were working on getting them to be 2 minutes or less, and in many cases we were very proud of ourselves. They were less than 1 minute, but that took time and coordination.
Scott, what are you paying attention to during those final moments before the performance begins backstage?
To me, it's at that point, using your eyes, using your ears, using your nose, like, does everything look, sound, smell the same as it did the last time we did it? If something is different, why is it different? Our crews have checklists that they go through. Stage management backs them up with their own checklists. So everybody has sort of their run of how things should be, where they should be. My job is to having been in and around that space, I'll typically walk around and look for things that are out of place. So just to kind of be that final set of eyes or ears or whatever, literally even smells. Like I said, like there's things when you're like, something doesn't smell right. And sometimes that's a lighting thing, or sometimes it's just something that's out of place. It can be something very small that causes a larger issue.
So like multi-dimensional continuity expert. They have those people on films make sure the collar is in the right place, but you're doing it in order to make sure that it's safe in addition to looking correct. What part of your job does an audience benefit from, but maybe they never think about? Francesca, what do you think?
I mean, I would say for me, I don't know that it's necessarily a benefit, but people don't realize that everything that happens from when literally for the house lights to dim and the recorded announcement to play that reminds people to turn off their cell phones, that happens because that's a cue that I call. So if I don't say go, the show doesn't start. And then same thing, at the end of the night when the bows are complete and the cast is exiting the stage, then the last cue of the night is bringing the house lights to full and the audience leaves the building. So that's kind of the end caps, the bookends of my job. But I think that people don't necessarily realize that, like, physically I'm the person who pushes the ship out of the dock.
Do either of you ever stand backstage, look around, and take a minute to think, this is my job?
Oh, every day. Every day. I really do, every day.
I try to kind of take the time, hopefully on every show or at least every season, to kind of remind myself, because we do we are lucky to do this. I mean, there are a lot of people who work in the arts, and the arts can be a very challenging business. Yes, this is insane and this is crazy, but this is what we get to do, and we're actually lucky to get to do this.
For me, it's often when the orchestra joins the process. I mean, the music part in general, going back to, like Scott said, when does it become a reality? It's like when there's music in the building again, when we hear singers, when we hear pianists, and then we get a 65 or 70 piece orchestra involved. And that's, those are those moments of like, pinch me, things that most people have to buy $100 ticket to go and hear in some symphony hall somewhere. That's just a normal day for us. And they're down the hall rehearsing, or they're in the orchestra pit, and it's the best ever.
So at some point, the audience arrives, the lights dim, the conductor walks into the pit, and everything has to work. What does that moment in you feel like?
For the most part, I feel calm and steady and excited for sure. But the excitement piece of it in me there has to be a little bit of a separate part of it for me, because if I get too excited, then I can't have the steadiness that I need to run the production. For me, as a stage manager, there's not fear or nervousness, because we've been through everything. We know how it goes. We've laid all the plans. We've rehearsed all the scene changes. We've connected with all the people, going back to everything we've spoken about.
And Scott, what is your favorite moment in the life cycle of a production? Is there a moment that never gets old, no matter how many productions you've worked on?
To me, I like the sort of cyclical nature of what we do. That every production has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But to me, the end of a production and that idea that you're creating a blank slate for the next one. Typically at the end of a season or at the end of a show, everything gets moved out. We put a fresh coat of black paint on the floor, and it's just pristine and it's ready. That sort of quiet and peaceful and clean slate and ready for the next show.
I think that says a lot about your personality, Francesca. What about you?
I would say I'm probably definitely a performance girly. I definitely, one of the things that's great at Sarasota Opera is that we get to do a lot of performances. Some places you get to do only 1 or 2 or 3, depending on the scope of a season. So I love that we get to do sometimes 10 or 12 performances of one opera. And I love the way that a show morphs from performance to performance, even if it's the exact same show on paper and it's the exact same show that the director said, and it's the exact same way that we've been rehearsing with the conductor. There's still, because we're dealing with humans, and again, coming back to live theater, there's always a different energy.
What is the community like, the backstage community? And I think that may also include the singers and anybody that you're working with on the daily. So what is that like for both of you?
We spend 12 plus hours a day together, 6 days a week for weeks on end. So to me, it's very important that we trust one another. We can be vulnerable with one another. We can be straightforward. In the collective of the company, we're always professional and calm and clear, but behind closed doors, we have the ability to let loose and laugh or cry if it's a hard day, or lie on the floor. Which happens once in a while. And then the way that we interface with the rest of the company, because I think the way that we build our community within my relatively small department, because we touch so many other departments and so many other aspects of the company and of a production, that we're able to spread that same energy throughout the company.
So if you both could attend one opera this season as an audience member, which one would you choose? Francesca?
One of my top 5 favorite operas has always been Janufa. I worked on it actually 20 years ago now as an assistant in a different company towards the beginning of my career. And I think it's an incredible opera. I'm stage managing it this coming season because I love it so much. I can't imagine not getting to be in that rehearsal room every single day. And I would say that would be a show that I would love to see from the audience.
Scott, what opera would you watch if you were in the audience?
That's a tough one. I mean, this is going to be a strong season, and I'm looking forward to it. I think that, to me, Francesca already said Unifa, so I can't say that one. But because that one is iconic and you don't get to see it very often, I think that's a good reason to see it. But I do think I am looking forward to the Traviata also, just because it's going to be and it's going to be a spectacle, and it's going to be, if someone's never been to the opera before, to get a sense of opera scale and opera beauty, it's going to be, a good one to see.
Traviata is an excellent first opera. That is very, very true.
All right, we're going to do rapid fire. So we're going to start with you, Francesca. I'm going to go through the questions, and you answer as quickly as it comes to you, and then we will ask Scott to do the same thing. Francesca, favorite opera?
Yes. Oh, man. Aida.
Favorite backstage snack?
Rice cakes.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Working a morning rehearsal or an evening performance?
Evening performance.
Favorite place in the opera house?
The courtyard.
Most used phrase during production week?
Hold please.
One word that describes opening night?
Exhilarating.
One word that describes tech week?
Steadfast.
All right, Scott, it's your turn. We're going to go through the same questions.
Okay.
All right. Favorite opera?
Otello.
Favorite backstage snack?
Snacks aren't allowed backstage.
Uh-oh.
But dark chocolate.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Working a morning rehearsal or an evening performance?
I get to do both, so I
All
I
right.
didn't realize it was a choice.
Favorite place in the opera house?
Most recently, I'll say, I know it's not rapid fire, but I was up in the catwalks recently and got to see the stage from the catwalk, and it's a beautiful way to see the stage, because you get to see the sort of the age. I'm right under the roof of this 100-year-old building. From that vantage point is a great place to see the stage from. In the last week, my favorite place was the catwalk.
Most used phrase during production week?
Have you eaten?
So true.
One word that describes opening night?
Culmination.
One word that describes tech week?
Exhaustion.
All right, so if the audience could pull back the curtain for just 1 minute, what would each of you most want them to see?
I think it would be really interesting for them to get to peek and see what it would be like in the midst of a really hectic change, And when I say hectic, not crazy, not wild, but there's just so much going on at one time that I think it would be really interesting for them to get to see those moving parts and pieces.
How about you, Scott?
I agree. I think the idea that they could see all of these people working together towards this sort of common goal, most of the time are completely unseen and not really thought about. And the idea that not what motivates them, to do what they're best. They'd like to do as good as they can, because that's reward in and of itself.
What do you hope audiences understand about the work that happens behind the scenes after they hear this conversation?
I would love for this listening audience to understand that there's as much of a show happening off stage throughout the whole process that there is happening on stage. Our work is fulfilling and true and real, and especially for young people to know that it's a real job, and it's incredibly impactful and gratifying work as well.
You can't have a production without the folks that support the production. Scott and Francesca, thank you so much for joining me today.
We're so happy to do it. Thank you for asking us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Behind every performance is a team of skilled professionals, many of whom have spent decades mastering their craft. They've worked on stages across the country, built careers in some of the nation's most respected theaters, and brought that knowledge and experience here. They know exactly what they're doing, even if their work is often invisible. It's a remarkable thing. They're not doing it for applause. They don't step into the spotlight when the audience rises to its feet. They aren't looking for recognition or glory. They do this because they believe in it, because they take pride in doing difficult things well, because there is a unique satisfaction in being part of something larger than yourself. Every performance depends on a dance most people never see, unfolding backstage in the wings, in control booths, hallways, workshops, and often in the dark. It's a choreography shaped by years of experience, trust, communication, and hard work. Most of us will never see it, and that's the point. Night after night, these are the people making hundreds of small decisions, getting every detail right, so that from the audience, everything feels effortless. So, the next time the house lights fade, the announcement asks you to silence your phone, or a scene change happens flawlessly before your eyes, remember that none of it happens on its own. It happened because a dedicated team made it happen. And that's the human story behind every performance. And that's what happens behind the blue curtain.